I had always believed that family came first. For years, my parents had supported me through thick and thin. They sacrificed so much for me to have the opportunities one had, and when I finally reached a place where I could help them, I thought the least I could do was give back. What I didn't expect was that my kindness would eventually become a source of manipulation, one that would change my relationship with them forever. It all started when I bought them a house. A beautiful, spacious home in a quiet neighborhood, far away from the cramped, noisy apartment they had been living in. I was finally in a position to give them something they'd always wanted, a place to call their own, where they could retire in peace. The moment I handed them the keys to their new home, I could see the pride in their eyes. My mom was gushing, her hands shaking as she stepped inside. "This is beautiful," she exclaimed, taking in the open floor plan and the large windows that gave a stunning view of the city. My father, always more reserved, nodded in approval, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. At that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: satisfaction. I had worked so hard for years, pushing myself to the limit, and finally, I could afford to give back. They deserved this. After everything they had done for me, this was the least I could do. For a few months, everything seemed perfect. My mother spent days decorating, sending me pictures of every detail, from the curtains she picked out to the furniture she had carefully arranged. She'd call me every few days to talk about what else she wanted to change. My father, usually quiet, would sometimes mention how comfortable he was now. He even said he was sleeping better without the sounds of the old neighborhood keeping him up. I felt proud, like I had finally done something truly meaningful for the people who had given everything to ensure I had a good life. Then came the job opportunity. A once-in-a-lifetime assignment that would take me overseas for 3 months. It was the kind of project that could launch my career to new heights, and while I was torn about leaving, I knew it was an opportunity one couldn't pass up. I explained to my parents that I would be gone for a few months, and they were supportive, urging me to go and make the most of it. But once I left, I fell into a whirlwind of work and travel, the time zone differences making communication difficult. My interactions with my parents became limited to brief text messages, and I didn't think much about it until I came home. I arrived late at night, exhausted from the long flight and the grueling schedule. All I wanted was to fall into my own bed and sleep for a week. But when I unlocked the door to my apartment, I froze. The lights were on. The smell of my mother's perfume lingered in the air. And there, sitting in my living room, were my parents, acting as though nothing was wrong. My father had his feet up on my coffee table, flipping through channels, while my mother casually sipped a cup of tea, scrolling through her phone. A half-eaten plate of food sat on the couch, as though they had made themselves at home. I dropped my bags by the door, my mind racing. "What are you doing here?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. My mother turned with a smile. "Oh, sweetheart, you're home early. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." I stared at her, still in shock. "That doesn't answer my question. What are you doing in my apartment?" She waved it off. "Don't be so dramatic. We've just been staying here for a little while." I could feel a cold rush of anger spreading through me. "A little while?" I repeated, my voice tight with disbelief. "Why?" There was a pause before my father cleared his throat. "Well, it just made more sense," he said nonchalantly. "More sense than what?" I demanded, trying to make sense of the situation. My mother hesitated before speaking. "We left the house you bought for us. We rented it out." My stomach dropped. "What? You rented it out?" I repeated in disbelief. "My gift to you, and you rented it out to strangers?" "Well," she continued, "we figured we could make some extra money. Your place is so spacious, and it's just been sitting here empty. We thought we'd stay here for a while." My father chimed in, "It just made sense. We've been looking to make some extra cash. Besides, we're getting along fine here, and we're saving money." I felt a wave of frustration crash over me. I had worked so hard to give them everything, to make sure they didn't have to worry about finances anymore, and this was how they repaid me? They had turned my apartment into their new home, all while renting out the place I had bought for them. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice low and controlled. You're living here for free, while collecting rent from strangers in the apartment I bought for you? My mother laughed nervously, trying to downplay the situation. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds worse than it is. I felt my blood boil, but I kept my composure. How long were you planning on keeping this from me? We were going to tell you soon, my father said dismissively. It's not a big deal. Just a temporary arrangement. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. This wasn't temporary. This was a complete betrayal. The next few days were a blur. After that night, I barely slept. I spent my time running between meetings and working on my project, but every moment my mind drifted back to my parents and the betrayal I had just uncovered. What made it worse was that they didn't seem to understand what the problem was. They genuinely believed they were doing me a favor by saving money and living in my apartment, as though they were doing me a kindness. And I couldn't stop thinking, how could they possibly think this was okay? They had always been the ones to tell me how important it was to respect each other's space. Yet here they were, completely ignoring my boundaries and making themselves at home in a place I had worked so hard to provide for them. I felt like I was losing control, and that feeling, the sense that nothing I had worked for was truly mine, was eating away at me. One evening, a few days after I came back from my trip, I decided to confront them. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I needed answers. I texted them, asking if we could meet at a nearby cafe. They agreed, and I arrived early, giving myself time to mentally prepare. I couldn't let emotions get the best of me, I had to stay composed. But when I saw them walk in, I felt my stomach twist in knots. They looked so casual, so comfortable. My mother was wearing one of the old dresses she always wore when I was younger, the one she would take me out to the park in. My father had his jacket on, the same one he always wore when he went to work in the old days. They looked like nothing had changed. I stood up when they approached the table, trying to keep my expression neutral. Hey, honey, my mom greeted me with a warm smile, as if everything was just fine. How's your work? You're looking good. Did you have a nice trip? I forced a smile, taking a deep breath. Yeah, the trip was fine. Work's busy, but that's not what I want to talk about. My father sat down, taking a sip from the coffee that had been placed in front of him. Then let's talk, son. What's on your mind? I stared at him for a moment, weighing my words carefully. I want to talk about the apartment. The one I bought for you. The smile faded from my mother's face, and I could see a slight shift in her demeanor. What about it? She asked, her voice suddenly tense. I want to know why you rented it out without telling me. Why you've been living in my place for weeks without any explanation. Why you didn't trust me enough to have a real conversation about it. My father's eyes narrowed. We didn't think it was a big deal. We thought we were doing what was best for the family. Best for the family? I repeated, incredulous. How is this best for the family? You're taking advantage of me. I gave you that house because I thought you'd have a safe place to live, not because I wanted you to take my apartment for yourself and charge strangers rent. This isn't what I signed up for. My mother's face flushed slightly, but she didn't back down. We didn't ask you for anything. You offered to buy us that house, and you've helped us enough. We just thought we could make some extra money and not bother you too much. I could feel the frustration bubbling up inside me, threatening to spill over. But you did bother me. You've taken my space, my privacy, and now you're making money off it. Do you even understand how that feels? My father, still calm, leaned forward slightly. You've always been so independent, so self-sufficient. We thought you'd appreciate us making our own way. But you didn't make your own way. I shouted, my voice rising. You took something that was mine without asking, and now you're trying to justify it by pretending like it's no big deal. The cafe was quiet, the tension between us thick and suffocating. I could feel the eyes of the other patrons on us, but I didn't care. I had to say what I was feeling. I had to get it out. Do you have any idea how this looks? I continued, my voice low and shaking with anger. I've spent my entire life trying to do everything right for you. I worked my ass off to make sure you had everything you needed. And now, I come home to find you've completely ignored my boundaries and treated my generosity like it's something you can take advantage of. My mother's eyes widened with surprise, but she didn't seem to fully understand the weight of what I was saying. Honey, we didn't think it would be a problem. We were just trying to make things work. By using me? I shot back. You think that's making things work? The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in my father's eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. I never meant for you to feel this way, he said, his voice quiet now. We didn't want to burden you. Burden me? I repeated. You've already burdened me. You've taken my space, my trust, and now you're asking me to keep quiet about it. My mother looked at my father, and for the first time, they both seemed uncertain. They didn't have a response. The weight of what I was feeling started to hit me all at once. It wasn't just the apartment. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that they had taken my love and turned it into something they could manipulate. They had crossed the line, and I didn't know how to move forward. Look, I said, standing up. I don't know how to fix this. But I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I need space. I need to think. I didn't wait for their response. I turned and walked out of the cafe, feeling a strange mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I had always believed family was supposed to have your back. But now, I wasn't so sure. The days that followed were difficult. After the confrontation, things felt off. I had thought that I would feel some sense of relief after finally speaking my mind, but instead, I just felt emptier, as though the weight of everything that had happened was sinking in. I avoided my parents for a while, unsure of what to say or how to move forward. My apartment, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The memories of their intrusion loomed over me, reminding me of the trust one had given them and the betrayal that had shattered it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening, that the situation wasn't just about the apartment. It was about respect, boundaries, and the unhealthy dynamics that had been building for years. One night, as I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through emails, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. We need to talk. Can we meet tomorrow? Please. I didn't know what to make of it. After everything that had happened, I didn't expect them to reach out, not without a deeper understanding of what they had done wrong. I had been so consumed with my own anger and frustration that I hadn't considered the possibility that they might be trying to make amends. I stared at the text for a few moments, contemplating whether I should respond or simply leave it unanswered. Finally, I typed back. Okay. Tomorrow at 3? She quickly replied with a yes and added a simple, I'm sorry for everything. That text hit me harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to believe it was genuine. Part of me wanted to believe that they had realized the damage they had caused. But another part of me remained skeptical. After all, the conversation had been so one-sided. I had been the one doing all the confronting. They hadn't really taken responsibility for what they had done. I spent the rest of the night pacing around my apartment, trying to gather my thoughts. What if this meeting was just another attempt to manipulate me? What if they were trying to get me to back down, to accept their behavior and pretend nothing had happened? I had to prepare for the possibility that they might not be as sorry as they seemed. The next afternoon, I drove to the cafe where we had met before. I got there early again, just like last time, and found a quiet corner to sit in. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to be ready for whatever came next. When my parents walked in, they looked different, more subdued, more hesitant. My mother's usual confident demeanor was replaced with an almost fragile sense of vulnerability. My father, too, had a more uncertain expression. They weren't the same people I had confronted a few days ago. Hey, my mom greeted me softly as she sat down. Thanks for agreeing to meet. I nodded, my stomach tightening. So, what's this about? You said you wanted to talk. My father cleared his throat. Look, son, we've been doing a lot of thinking. And, well, we were wrong. What we did, taking the apartment without telling you, it wasn't right. We didn't consider how you might feel about it, and for that, we're sorry. I blinked, surprised at the honesty in his voice. This wasn't the defense or denial I had expected. For the first time, it seemed like they were acknowledging the reality of what had happened. My mother continued, her voice softer than usual. We were trying to help, but we understand now that we crossed the line. We didn't mean to hurt you. We've always depended on you, and maybe we took it for granted. I felt a pang in my chest. For so long, I had felt like the responsible one in the family, the one everyone leaned on. But now, I was hearing them admit something that felt almost like a crack in the foundation of everything I had known. I'm glad to hear that, I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the chaos inside me. But it's not just about the apartment. It's about everything, the way you've always expected me to solve your problems, the way you've put me in the position of caretaker without ever really asking me if I wanted that. My father looked down at his hands, unable to meet my gaze. We never meant to put that burden on you. We thought we were doing what was best. That's the problem, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You never asked me if I thought it was best. You never considered what I wanted. You just assumed. There was a long pause. My parents exchanged a look, and for the first time, I saw real regret in their eyes. They hadn't just made a mistake, they had taken advantage of me, not maliciously but out of their own neediness, and now it was clear they were beginning to realize it. I don't want to lose my family, I continued, my voice quiet but firm. But I also can't keep living like this, where my needs and boundaries don't matter. I need you to understand that. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on mine. We understand. We really do. And we want to make things right. We don't want to hurt you anymore. I felt the tears threatening to spill, but I held them back. This wasn't the moment to break down. I had to stand my ground. We'll make it right, my father added, his voice thick with emotion. No more secrets, no more overstepping boundaries. We'll fix this. I nodded, not entirely sure if I could believe them, but I wanted to. I wanted to believe that things could get better, that my family could change. But deep down, a voice whispered that I had to be careful. This was only the beginning. The real test would be whether they could change their behavior, not just their words. As I left the cafe that afternoon, a strange sense of emptiness lingered. I had gotten what I wanted, acknowledgement, an apology, but I still didn't know if I could fully trust them again. I wasn't sure if I had the strength to keep fighting for something that might never change. The days after the cafe meeting were filled with uncertainty. I wanted to believe that my parents' apology was genuine, but part of me couldn't shake the fear that they were just saying what they thought I wanted to hear. They had always known how to manipulate situations to get what they wanted, and even now, it felt like they were trying to regain control over me in a different way. I tried to move forward with my life, focusing on work and my personal projects. It was difficult. The weight of the betrayal still lingered in the back of my mind, and though they had apologized, I couldn't forget the years of them expecting me to solve their problems without ever considering my own needs. Every time I spoke to them, I found myself measuring their words, analyzing every interaction for signs of manipulation. It was exhausting. I had spent so many years trying to please them, trying to meet their expectations, that I had forgotten what it was like to simply live for myself. One evening, after a long day at work, I sat down on the couch with a cup of tea, hoping to clear my mind. But the silence in my apartment felt suffocating. I could hear the buzz of my phone, a constant reminder of the people trying to reach me, of the expectations still weighing on my shoulders. The message came from my mother. We were thinking of visiting this weekend. Would it be okay? I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. A part of me wanted to say yes, to try to rebuild that connection, to ease the tension. But another part of me recoiled at the idea. Every visit felt like another attempt to pull me back into the role I had played for so many years, the dutiful son who always put family first, even when it came at the expense of my own happiness. I took a deep breath and replied, "I think I need some time to myself this weekend. I have a lot to work through." My phone buzzed almost immediately. "We understand. We just want to make sure you're okay." For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel guilty for setting a boundary. I didn't owe them anything. I had spent so many years letting them control the narrative of our family, letting them dictate my actions, and now I was reclaiming my space. It was empowering, but also terrifying. What if they didn't understand? What if this decision only drove a wedge between us? As the weekend approached, I found myself at a crossroads. I had taken a step back from my parents, but the fear of losing them still lingered. The idea of cutting them out completely felt like an impossible choice, but I knew that I couldn't keep allowing them to dictate the terms of our relationship. On Saturday, I woke up to a call from my father. I almost didn't answer it, but something inside me told me I needed to hear him out. "Hey," he said when I picked up. "I understand if you need some space, but we're worried about you. You haven't been the same since the apartment situation. We just want to help." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but I also sensed the underlying pressure. They were worried, yes, but there was still that old pattern of trying to fix things on their terms. They wanted me to be the person they had always relied on, the one who took care of everything, the one who made the family feel whole. "I'm fine, Dad," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need some time to figure things out. I don't want to talk about the apartment anymore. I need space to process everything." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "Okay. I understand. But I want you to know that we love you, and we're here for you, no matter what." His words stung in a way I wasn't prepared for. I knew he loved me, but the love had always come with strings attached. It had always been conditional, wrapped in expectations that I could never fully meet. And now, as he spoke those familiar words, I realized that I couldn't go back to that. I couldn't keep sacrificing my own needs for the sake of their comfort. "I love you too, Dad," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I need to find my own way." After the call ended, I felt an overwhelming sense of both relief and sadness. I had said what I needed to say, but it still didn't feel like enough. I had drawn a line in the sand, but the emotional toll it had taken on me was still too fresh. Over the next few weeks, I started focusing more on my own growth. I signed up for a painting class I had been interested in for years but never had the time for. I began taking long walks in the park, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I started to rediscover parts of myself that had been buried beneath the weight of family obligations and expectations. But even as I began to feel more like myself, there was still the lingering question of my family's role in my life. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something irreversible. Every step I took toward independence seemed to pull me further away from them. And the more space I created, the more I feared that I was losing them for good. One day, as I was sitting on my balcony, sketching a landscape, I received another text from my mom. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a moment, wondering if it was the right time. I had made so much progress in reclaiming my life, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for another conversation that could potentially pull me back into the old dynamics. I typed back, "I'm not sure I'm ready yet. I need some more time." The reply came quickly, "We'll be here when you're ready. We just want to fix this." And as I read those words, I realized something important. They wanted to fix things, but it wasn't just about fixing the apartment situation anymore. It was about the larger issue, the way our entire relationship had been built on unhealthy foundations, on manipulation, guilt, and expectations. I wasn't ready to jump back into that world, not yet. But I had to admit that the more time passed, the more I realized I couldn't keep running from the responsibility of making things right. The weeks after my last conversation with my parents were filled with reflection. I had set boundaries, I had started to reclaim my independence, and yet the weight of my decisions still lingered. It felt like I was walking a tightrope. One wrong move and I might fall back into the old patterns, back into the family dynamic that had always felt like a cage. I continued with my art class, something that had become a source of solace in the chaos of my life. Every brushstroke, every sketch, was a way of reconnecting with myself, of discovering parts of me I had long forgotten. It was strange, but the process of creating something from nothing gave me a sense of control that I had never felt before. I could shape my world, my future, the way I wanted. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on my new life, there were moments when I felt that tug, that pull to the past. I missed my parents, but I didn't miss the burden of living for them. I longed for the kind of relationship that didn't feel like an emotional transaction, one where I wasn't constantly giving pieces of myself away. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Healing was never easy, especially when it meant confronting the truth about what had happened all those years. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep running from it. I had spent too much of my life trying to please others, trying to avoid conflict, trying to hold my family together at the expense of my own well-being. And now, for the first time in years, I had to ask myself, what did I need? I wasn't entirely sure of the answer yet, but I knew that finding it would take time, and that was okay. It was okay to not have everything figured out, to not know exactly what the future held. I had spent so much of my life trying to control every outcome, but I was starting to see that sometimes, the best way forward was to embrace uncertainty. One Sunday afternoon, I found myself sitting in a park, surrounded by the soft rustling of the trees and the distant chatter of families. It was a beautiful day, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. My phone buzzed, and I saw that it was a message from my mom. "We miss you. We just want to know if there's any chance we could see you soon. We love you." I stared at the words for a long time. Part of me wanted to run back to them, to undo the distance I had put between us, but I knew that I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I was sure that I was doing this for the right reasons. I wasn't going to go back to being the person I was before, someone who was afraid of confrontation, afraid of disappointing others, afraid of living for myself. I took a deep breath and typed my response, "I love you too, but I'm still figuring things out. I need more time." There was a pause before the reply came, "We understand. Take all the time you need." It was the first time in years that I felt like my needs were being respected, that I wasn't being forced into a situation for the sake of someone else's comfort. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my life. As the months passed, I slowly began to rebuild my relationship with my family. It wasn't the same as it had been before. We had both changed, and there was a level of honesty that had never been there before. My parents respected my boundaries, and I began to understand their own struggles and fears in a way I never had before. We didn't always agree, but we were learning to communicate in a healthier way, without the manipulation or guilt that had once defined our interactions. I still spent time with my parents, but I also continued to prioritize my own life. I went on trips alone, I nurtured my relationships with friends, and I poured myself into my art. And in doing so, I began to understand something I had never realized before, that I could love my family, but I didn't have to lose myself in the process. I had spent so many years thinking that love meant sacrifice, that it meant giving up parts of myself to make others happy. But now I knew the truth. True love wasn't about giving everything away, it was about finding balance. It was about respecting yourself enough to set boundaries, to speak up when something wasn't right, and to be okay with the idea that not everyone would like the person you became when you stopped trying to please them. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, working on a painting, I realized that the person staring back at me from the canvas wasn't the person I had been before. She was stronger, more confident, more sure of who she was. She wasn't defined by her family's expectations, or by the mistakes of the past. She was free. And for the first time in a long while, I could finally breathe.